Okay, welcome everybody with a special interview here for the Gym Life podcast. Finally getting together with the new 105-pound world champ. And it kind of worked out in our favor. We were supposed to visit with Nic Cambi a week ago, or about a week and a half ago. I couldn't make the interview. In between now and then, he wins the world championships. Not only that, Clash of the Coast champion 2021, America's Strongest Man champion 2021. Every pressing record I think you own out there, don't you, Nic, right now?
I'm missing the circus dumbbell, but
I was going to ask you that.
Maybe next year.
Yeah, well, you got to leave something on the plate. You had one hell of a 2021.
Yes,
you know, before we get into that run, Nic, which is an epic run. I mean, honest to God, that 105 class that you compete in, to win those three events in particular in the same year, I don't know if we'll ever see it again, because that 105 class is just stacked. And I think in the last 4 years, we've had 4 different champions, if I'm not mistaken, right?
So we talk about 4 different champions, just like, for instance, like OSG champion or America's Strongest Man champion. So yeah, that's generally kind of been the case. But first of all, Joe, thank you for having me on. It's always great to kind of sit down and kind of chat, and of course kind of spread the good word of strongman.
Absolutely.
But back to your question. What was your question again?
Well, it wasn't necessarily a question. Maybe it was. There was 4 different champs in the last 4 years in the 105 class. So it's arguably the most competitive class out there. And the guys that you're competing against regularly, arguably can make that podium finish just about every show. So for you to pull off the America's Strongest Man Clash, and of course, finish that off with OSG, that's a pretty special trifecta.
Yeah, and each contest that brings their own kind of athletes. So since it's like 3 different federations, you have guys kind of like a little more dedicated to one federation over the other. So you're getting the best of the best athletes from all 3 federations. So that's kind of one way I kind of looked at it, when like the kind of like that would be a good way. But in the past, and of course, I always try to be a little bit of a 105 kilo historian and see what other athletes ahead of me have done. And there's been some pretty good runs. Even a lot of these guys are good friends of mine as well. But like more recently was probably like Anthony Furman. He got like 2nd at America's, 1st at Worlds. And then, I think that was probably his one of his better years. And then he also had like a decent year where he came in 2nd at America's and 3rd at Worlds. So those were, again, 2 good podium finishes, but didn't win. Sean DeMarinis in 2016 did 2nd at Worlds and 1st at America's, which was probably the best of the 2, but of course it wasn't those 2. And then at that time there was no kind of clash. So those were like our 2 main shows, at least dating back since at least 2015, maybe even earlier to like 2013, because from what I kind of remember, 2013, there was a world contest where Ben Kelsey won in the Ukraine. And of course he was crowned champion. 2014 is a little fuzzy. I think there was a contest in Norway. 2015, I think they had it again in Norway, like in Norway, Finland. And I think that's when Ben Kelsey won. But so since 2016, they've been having the Giant Slab official strongman, but it's been the 105 catch. The 105, let's say, kind of class when it comes to Giant Slab official strongman started like in 2016. So we've really only had like 5 years to measure it, but at least in those 5 years, I was like for the first one to win America's in official strongman.
Yeah, that's pretty cool kind of side note to your year you had in 2021. We've talked about it more than a few times. The evolution of these other weight classes in the sport of strongman, to me, it's probably been the most special thing to watch over the last few years in particular, with all these different opportunities to showcase all these great athletes that aren't super heavyweights. You mentioned Anthony Furman and that 105 clash that he does every year, which is taking the United States by storm. Honestly, we all get excited about those events. How do you feel that evolution since you've been in the game? And what I mean by that is go back to when you started in strongman. What brought you to the sport? And what was your background athletically?
So a few questions. So if I get off track, just back in. Athletically, my background was I was a wrestler. I wrestled for 10 years. Played football also in high school, but I wrestled throughout college. And I was a 197 wrestler, and also I did heavyweight my senior year. And then after wrestling was over, I kind of still had that athletic, not athletic, but that need for athletic activity or competition or something to kind of fill the time. So I originally enrolled in bodybuilding. The bodybuilding coach introduced me to strongman, and I decided to go that direction. And at the time, I was just under the impression, as most people in the general public are, is that they're not familiar with the weight classes of strongman. So I've always watched a lot of times we would take a lot of trips to kind of back and forth in Florida when I was kind of growing up. But a lot of times the World's Strongest Man reruns were just during those times during the day where they put. So I always kind of watch it back and forth. But I always thought like strongman was great, but like, I'm not 6'5". I can't. I can't. I was like that'd be really difficult. But I'm actually learning that that doesn't really matter. You can still be like up to that level, but again, it's how much you want to put into it. But in terms of I would say I didn't know weight classes existed, so I thought it would be something interesting to try. And I've always actually stayed in like the 105 kilo and then jumped into like amateur heavyweights kind of competitions. But for the most part, just once I learned there was a class, I was like, all right, let's give this a go.
Not much of a class though back then when you started. Even the 105s, it was probably hard to find competitions, wasn't it?
Depending on what area you're in. The Northeast has always had a good contingency of strongman and strength training. So if I, again, kind of knowing my history, right. So like the owner of the gym I go to the most, Total Performance Sports, he used to do a lot of, of course, he's hosted contests throughout like the 2000s, like Massachusetts Strongest Man, but he's had the figures of like Kevin, I don't know if you remember like Kevin Nee.
Yeah.
But he came through again, that kind of northern Mass, north of Boston kind of strongman community. So he kind of came through Murph. There's also like back then, like Sven Carlson used to come and train at TPS as well. So he was kind of in and out, but again, that Murph really kind of spread around a lot of the strongman influence around like the northern community. And originally that was and Murph learned strongman from Art McDermott prior to that. So there's always been a good contingent. So there's always contests, but it was just very, very much so kind of like a local, either like parking lot contest. Of course, like the kind of the general implements. Sometimes the implements could be a little kind of beat up, and so, but there's always got a good crowd and again a good community. And it could be a contest in the middle of August on like 100-degree heat, but everybody's on their pavement kind of strutting it out. But
there wasn't much of an end game to it though. At that point, it was
a little bit. So the goal was to it's pretty much get win the local show, go to nationals, fight for a pro card, and then if you get a pro card, you get to compete at America's Strongest Man. And then so that was like 2012, went to my first national 2013. So that was pretty much the road at the time. There wasn't it was tough unless you're like the one or two top American to get an invite to like World's Strongest Man. There wasn't like a clear process to that like there is now with official strongman. Of course you didn't have the clash, and also there weren't as many opportunities, but but to kind of what it's come now, it's definitely taken some strides. I think it's almost gone like a little up and down a little bit, because even like 2016, there was a lot of buzz, but then kind of died off 2017, 2018, but then lately it's been back kind of roaring. And I think 2022 is going to be a huge year, not only for heavyweights, but for all the weight classes. And I think just even in the Clash series, just the U80s and the U90s getting their own shows along with a few of the women's weight classes next year. So that's going to be, again, a good spectacle and kind of really highlight the weight classes rather than maybe when, of course, like when strongman's in a national setting and you have a million weight classes.
Well, it's interesting because when you're talking about those other classes, those under 90s and 105s and that kind of thing, it really, it was its own evolution a little bit, because now you guys are starting to become household names. I don't think there's anybody in the strongman community right now that doesn't know who Nic Cambi is.
I hope that's the goal, right? And
yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, listen, you guys throw some big weights around, and we all mention it. I mean, pound for pound, when we see the kind of weights that the 105 class uses, and even the U90 class, that's some pretty impressive stuff. I mean, your pressing apparatus is, I mean, arguably, I mean, to me, it's more impressive than Iron Bibby, and no knock on Iron Bibby. But when you're talking to a guy that weighs 105 kilograms, putting a 412 pound log over his head, these are numbers that we never thought we would see the evolution of. What do you attribute that to? Do you think there's just more athletes coming in, more people that are kind of prepared to do the sport, or do you think it's more information to train the sport?
So I think I think that's why I find 105 kilo contest very fun and competitive, is because it is the most competitive class when you talk about just pure numbers. I think when you look at the large makeup of, let's just say either strength athletes or individuals that go to the gym, or like general population lifters, they're generally in that range of, let's just say like 180, 220 pounds. Yeah. So they're going to relate more to kind of the weight class strongman. So generally those, let's just say those weight classes are generally a larger population than the, I would say like the heavyweights, even if you want to just mark a middle,
sure,
line down the middle saying like 231s and under and 231s and above, right?
Well, it used to be, yeah.
So for the most part, so I think just since as strongman gets bigger, I think there's more relatability to the weight class. And again, it's just, you were saying before, just general knowledge. And even in 2012, I needed a bodybuilding coach to tell me there was weight class strongman. I couldn't find that on the internet. That wasn't something that was circulating. So it's definitely circulating more, but it's also, as certain weight classes grow, it's more relatability.
Well, it certainly has done wonders for the sport. You know, I've watched a lot of these amateur competitions this summer, been to a few of them, and we covered one up here in Traverse City, as a matter of fact. And to see the size of those classes and the amount of novice competitors that we're seeing that are coming in from other athletic backgrounds that want to compete, but know that they're just genetically not able to ever compete in a heavyweight class, maybe because of height or maybe what their athletic background is. Now, I get it. There's some one-offs like yourself and arguably Anthony and some other guys that can give it a 1-2 to some of these heavyweights. But for a majority of people, this just offers another opportunity, not only to compete, but now because of what we see with Clash, Worlds, and even Strongman Champions League, now there's different avenues for these athletes. And I guess what I'm getting at is we're seeing this flood now of growth through the strongman community, particularly in the United States.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So it's pretty exciting, but also I wouldn't say, also kind of around the world. And of course, I use the example of this past World Games. There was two competitors from oh shoot, I'm butchering this right now. But they were Africa's 1 and 2 strongest man, 105 kilo. And they came down, of course, Melvin and Paul from Zambia. There we go. And then we were supposed to have some more international competitor. We were supposed to have an individual from India as well. Of course, India is pretty new to the strongman game. Probably the last 3 or 4 years, I was talking to one competitor out there. But there's a lot of these different 105 classes that are just kind of popping out, and generally from countries that don't necessarily have a heavyweight presence as well. They're just more the 105s are popping out compared to like heavyweight. So I think that'd be interesting in terms of potentially being more worldly represented compared to maybe like a heavyweight competitor. So I think potentially, I'm excited for the next few years.
Yeah, I think just to piggyback that, and what you're getting at is the idea that 105 and these other classes have this potential to be, 10 times bigger than they are now, just for the amount of competitors now we can get into the sport. I got a question for you. Sure. What do you consider your weakest point in, and I'm going to pick you apart a little bit because I'm trying to find a weakness, right? I went through all your videos and I was going to ask you, what do you think your one weakness is when you're competing? Is there something that even a champion like yourself, you can critique yourself back in the facility and go, okay, I wasn't real happy with this. This is next year's goal. I mean, you're a pressing fool. You can deadlift like no other. I mean, what would you call your weakness in the sport?
It is interesting. Because the goal is to, of course, again, if you have any weak chinks in your armor, again, you've got the whole, everything's got to collapse. But for the most part, I would say it's not necessarily like kind of weak points, but just maybe bad events or bad movements.
Let's stick with that, bad events.
All right. But like as of late, throwing has been a difficulty for me, but it's interesting in the sense of it's a very not newer, but like probably since 2018, throwing's made a resurgence into the sport. So the last kind of 3 years. So I've only been competing in competition with throws for the last 3 years compared to maybe if I'm competing with someone else. And I've done those events since 2012. I'll have maybe a few years or more on them. So I don't really have more experience in my competition when it comes to throwing events. And it's not an event that natural comes easy for me. So I've been working on that, but I didn't hit, I had a goal to hit mid-pack at OSG or mid-pack or better at OSG. And I came below that. I came below that expectation. That almost cost me the contest.
Yeah, I was looking at that score kind of going into that last event. It was a lot closer than I thought, and I went back, and I was going to say the same thing. I just wanted to pick on you for a minute because when I saw that, I was like, wow, got pretty tight.
And then before that, but it's something that I'm pretty confident that it's gonna just take a lot of time and work, and it's like rigid clicks. So on the flip side, or prior to that, like deadlifting was my biggest, of course, vein of existence. When you look at, of course, the score sheet, I was losing all my points on the deadlift. So I was deadlifting for like twice a week for a while, just trying to really work that and get that right. But a lot of it came to fixing posture and weaknesses and interior tilts and all. So I had to go like a physical therapist. But once I did that, I was able to kind of really ramp up the deadlift. But that was my first thing. But I got points where I was like, man, this is pretty tough. I keep not doing well on the deadlift events. Like, this is pretty tough. Like, is this going to be like forever? Is this like not a thing, or is this something I can work through? And I was able to kind of work through it and now kind of make it one of my number one events, or one of those events I count on for consistent points. So if I can do that with my deadlift, I think I can do my throws, but I might need another year.
I would say so.
I
think, what are you pulling close to 800 right now, aren't you?
Yes. So 785 was my best pull.
Yeah, like I said, when I asked you that question first, what do you think maybe the event you need to work on the most? It's because I really couldn't find many chinks in your armor. And I thought when I saw that bag over bar, the throw, it's an interesting event, like you said, because if you haven't trained it, to try to kind of get your cues down for that bag release, because it certainly has little to do with strength than it does with the actual, I guess, the throw itself. Do you think a lot of guys are struggling with that, or is there some guys naturally are coming into it?
So naturally, some guys have better levers.
Mm-hmm.
Some guys are able to kind of train more than others. I put on a lot of training on it, but it just hasn't been clicking. And I think I'm really stuck in my ways to really, of course, give it the attention it needs at times. So like, of course, this off season, I'm going to have plenty of time to really give it attention. But in between those the contests I had, because I had America's Strongest Man about 6-7 weeks before official strongman games, and then 3 weeks before America's I did the record breakers. So I had all those contests. So I was able to train sandbags, but you don't really want to mess with your form too much. I know it's not that was perfect, but you don't want to mess with it too much because it's that close to competition. So you might hurt yourself in the long point. You always change up the form and then you don't train the right weight, but that was a call. But like, now it's the off season. Now it's time to kind of address. I got some suggestions from friends.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because those competitions you did were all relatively close in the calendar, and you don't see that a lot. Guys generally aren't doing 4 or 5 shows within a 6 or 7 month time frame. And I'm guessing going back to what would have been Clash was in March. Is that right?
Clash was in late April, early May.
Okay. And then America's was
actually, but before America's, I did Russia like four weeks after Clash.
Oh geez, okay.
And then I did, of course, Waco beginning of September, and then ASM at the end of September. So I had a little break between Russia and Waco. But I decided going for the log is something that of course, overhead pressing is that's what comes natural to me, and that's what's easy to kind of really improve on.
Where did that come from, Nick? How did you become such a good overhead presser?
I had another thought, but it's just all right. I'll go on this one. I think it's a combination. I think naturally, when it comes to just my build and leverages. I have kind of shorter arms and long, like a long torso, long legs. So I can, like, even if I'm split jerking or doing another movement, I can not only drive the bar up pretty strong, but I can also get the weight under it. But then I have a shorter arms, so it's easier for me to kind of lock out compared to another individual. So I feel, one, I'm naturally kind of more built for that. But I think I took a more interest probably like 2012 and 2013 in like Olympic lifting. And I kind of like taught myself a little bit how to split jerk. And then I refined that technique with going to Russian coaches in the nearby greater Boston area. They were down in a place called like Norwood Training Center. Then, of course, the owner there was Don, really nice man. But of course, he had these great coaches there that would come in, or a few of them lived in the area. But of course, one of the coaches was a multiple time Russian national winner in like 1 year, like I think either under 23 Europes 1 year. Wow. But he was of course a great athlete, but learned a lot of like the Russian technique when it comes to like Olympic lifting. I applied that towards strongman, but at the time I was more of a amateur strongman and like Olympic lifting fan, so I was doing that kind of in conjunction. But but I took everything that I liked about Olympic lifting and add that to strongman once I won my pro card and realized that I kind of had to choose one or the other. But I realized I do like Olympic lifting a lot, but the snatch is something that didn't come natural to me, and something that I was spending way too much time on for relatively no really upside when it comes to strongman. So I still clean and jerk, power clean, muscle clean, all the other overhead movements, but the snatch is something I didn't really carry through to my strongman.
So we talked briefly before we started the interview that, West Side is a part of your programming where you're at now. You do a little bit more conjugate with what you do. How does your programming in your off season, as you're coming into that now, do you more of a technician where now you're going to work more on specific event, I guess break down certain events to try to bring that into your programming, or do you have a little bit more generalized programming in your off season?
The program is always based off what's the goal at hand. Okay. So let's just say the first immediate goal would be the next contest coming up. So that would be Clash in this year. It's like mid-April, I think, like April 22nd. Okay. So we're about maybe like 5 months, a little more out from Clash now. And now my goal is, so first thing is that coming off these competitions, I gotta get my body rested. So I actually have taken 2 weeks off completely doing like maybe light gym sessions. I wasn't like gonna head to my regular gym so I don't get tempted, but I really need the rest off. But then my goal is just kind of slowly peak for April, right? So like I can't really, I don't want to go too hard prior, but I want to do all the right things, but I also have some items I want to get a hold of. So you try to program with all those items considered. So going kind of like, let's just say like the next month or so. Generally I like 3-week blocks. I do, of course, more linear periodization, or progressive overloading across those 3, sometimes 4 weeks. But I'm probably going to start with kind of like unilateral work, a lot of single leg stuff, more hypertrophy and bodybuilding. So I'm kind of more trying to focus on I'm getting a little side.
No, please, that's good stuff, man.
No, a lot of it is pretty much a kind of a slow kind of rebuilding. I do want to work with the tsunami bar at times, but it won't be maximal lifts. A lot of it will be like 50-60% right. At most for the first 3 weeks. And then, but like in terms of like some of those goals before the competition, I want to like get better at one motioning Atlas stones. I think that's something that I haven't needed to do up to this point, because the only competitor that's really was in the USA that was a great one motioner was Sean DeMarinis, and he was like 4-time America's Strongest Man. Yeah. But besides that, there wasn't a lot of people that had one motion. So I had really fast, like I have a quick like pick and load on the Atlas stone, and that was good enough for now. But I think going forward in the next few years, I think there's gonna be more individuals that can one motion that can really get through the Atlas stone series. So that's something I want to learn. Next year, I do want to get somewhere in like the 800-pound deadlift, but I also don't want to max just the max. I want to do it in a competition. So hopefully it's in the competition, but pretty much if it's not, I know I have some like deadlift for reps coming up in these competitions. So I'll try to beat some of those previous rep numbers, so that if that's like 700, I did 700 for 5 prior to America. So I'll try to beat those numbers or rep numbers, but I won't go, but I won't do a one rep max prior to the contest. But again, depending on what the event is. So obviously I want to get better at throws. So I might borrow a keg and a sandbag and always keep it in my car. And then potentially do it when I'm in like a yard and stuff like that. So I think just the consistency, and that's the one thing. So I live in an apartment in Quincy right now, which is like south of Boston, but my goal is to have a house, but it's tough to kind of throw kegs in a apartment complex. So
especially in Boston, you really find a place to park out there.
Yeah, right. So of course, eventually when I have a house, I want to have a whole, of course, gym set up, and I'll have a whole throwing setup. But in the meantime, I think I'll probably just travel with a keg and sandbag.
So you're programming then over that 5 months that you're leading into this next show. You kind of do more to, I guess it would be kind of just a bigger block for you. Then you sort of keep your numbers your percentages a little lower, work on a couple intangibles, the stone that you mentioned, your throws that you mentioned, but you kind of keep things in the pocket where your programming then adds percentages up until your show date to get you to that 100% or wherever that might be. Do you throw your deloads in there? And
So pretty much, if ideally, depending on, again, life sometimes get away with holidays coming up and vacations, but like 3 weeks on deload, 3 weeks on deload. That's generally been the mix that, like, if I go over those 3 weeks, I generally break down with like a little injury or get a little tweak. So I found like a 3 week progressive overload has generally been what's been working for me the last like 18 months, maybe 2 years.
Yeah, it's not brain surgery, right? You're not reinventing the wheel. This is just shit you've been doing forever.
Yeah, and I've actually kind of jumped away from it and realized, well, I need to get back to that because that was working. This is not. So I've also kind of experimented and see what works for body. But that's the biggest thing too, is just spending the hours, and for, of course, your listeners and all, consistency, spending hours. And sometimes like individuals are going to contests and like, oh, I really want to win. Why didn't I win? Well, like, you've spent maybe, let's say 20 hours in the sport of strongman, relatively new, but that guy's been doing the sport for over 1,000 hours, of course, over the years. So like, who's really going to win that contest? Right. So I think there's people need to just understand it comes down to consistency and hard work again to get into those high levels.
Certainly a lot of egos that are set aside at some of these first shows, aren't they?
Yeah.
Do you do a lot of implement stuff in your first couple months of that block? Or do you try to stick with more gym lifts?
I'll do certain implements, depending on kind of my goal. So I want to work on stones. So I'll work on stones, but generally I want to be working on stones prior until maybe 6 or 8 weeks out to a contest. It's gonna be a lot of kind of like barbell work. I do want to get working on kind of a circus dumbbell. I also bought a Sear dumbbell from Canada. So it was like 220 pounds and it's going to be fully machined and all. So I bought that recently. So I'm excited to try that. And then let's see. It just really depends on what's going to be like kind of enticing going kind of forward. But it's going to be very light implement work, but mostly the implement work will be contest specific. And I'll probably know that by at least 10, 12 weeks. So that will be my focus.
How about your core training, Nick? That's obviously a big thing that a lot of these new strongmen find out pretty quick in these novice shows and I'm kind of talking about them specifically right now, because a lot of these powerlifters and bodybuilders or strong gym guys come over into the strongman sport, which we love, and we embrace that. And they go to their first show, and a lot of times, like we just mentioned a minute ago, they set your ego set at the door, because you find out real quick that strongman implements require more than just static strength. I know you have a super powerful core. I mean, I see that specifically in your pressing. which goes a long ways. I see you working that tsunami bar a lot. And I know that's a big, geez, I would love to have one of those. I'll tell you right now, those are really nice. But do you do anything specific for that?
So originally, I think same reason why my deadlift was off is when I had that posterior tilt. Once I fixed that, because I was always wondering, because I was very quad dominant, of course, forces the hips down, the face forward, it makes the kind of abs weak. But I always had a great top 4 abs. I'm like, oh, I have the great top 5. I just need to get the bottom abs. Like always did bottom abs, just never really worked. And I realized I was pretty much doing ab work wrong. So once I fixed that, then I was really able to go to town with my core. And I do a lot of like heavy planks. I always try to do an ab workout towards the end of most of strongman workouts, like so. Especially after a good strongman workout, or a good hypertrophy, or like a bodybuilding day. Not bodybuilding, powerlifting day. Your core is very smashed, so that's a good time to really beat that up. But I also going into like each events, like you talk about, like either pressing, moving events, anything that really requires a strong core, like a car walk and all. I always warm up kind of like my lower abs, a lot of like dead bugs. That was of course a PT suggestion that I of course kind of carried on, and that activation of kind of like those lower abs and have like the right posture really kind of does help going forward. And that's something that not I ignored, but I didn't know I was missing in my early years.
Well, you certainly picked up on it quick, because I was looking at your 900 yoke walk the other day. That was pretty impressive. I know you've had a lot of yoke in the last couple competitions, particularly the Clash and the OSG, where you had a car in both, which I thought was cool. But I thought what the coolest thing was, and we brought this up on the podcast the other day, and it was great to see that squat event that you guys had at Clash. How do you feel about that?
That was fun, and of course, there's a reason. That was the first time. That was a big PR in terms of squat, but I never really had to PR my squat in order to compete. So even when I first came out, I think my PR on my squat was 535, and this was 600 for reps. So I was like, oh boy, I got a big task to manage. And originally it was going to be like a car squat or like a lever squat, which is a little different, which is
more of a leverage kind of thing. Yeah.
And then ends up being like a powerful leg press, or a difficult leg press, pretty much when it's on a level like that. But since it was a free squat, I'm like, all right, I got to train this. And then so once I did it, it was very exciting, but I was pretty nervous going into it. But now I think he's most likely bringing that back. So
cool.
I'm pretty excited to do it this time around, knowing
I love to see that stuff. Yeah, these events that we just kind of, for some reason, we just didn't. I get it from a local standpoint, being a smaller promoter, and you're not Anthony Furman, and you can't have the access to some of the stuff a lot of guys do on a promoting level locally. They just don't have the ability to get a lot of these crazier implements together that you have the luxury of using in a lot of your competitions. It would change the game though, wouldn't it? I mean, you don't see a lot of strongmen out there squatting. That would definitely change the game.
Yeah. So if, like, for instance, like an individual, like let's say like a heavyweight example, like a Kieliszkowski, maybe actually I'm not sure how his squat is, but for instance, I bet his squat is better than his deadlift, right? So that would give him more points if squatting was the main event. But for the most part, it's always been kind of an event, either like a Hercules, like a grip event, or like a truck pull. It's always kind of been a rare. It's never kind of like a rare second static lift in a contest. So if there's like 6 events, they'll throw in the squat. Like when Eddie Hall won the World's Strongest Man, they threw in the squat. So because that was a very static show, because it seemed kind of pertain to Eddie's strengths, but very static. So it's always been kind of like it lingers around use, like similar to how throws were. Throws were never really in contests. Now it's in every contest since 2018, which is enough's enough. Like,
I mean, it's fun to watch as a spectator. There are some events. I've always been a big fan of, from a spectator and competitive standpoint. I love the tire. Tire's not around much anymore because a lot of guys are
tire really, kind of. I did my last tire I did in Hungary, and then prior to that was 2015 in a local heavyweight contest. But I've only done like 3 times in my career. And
that was crazy. I mean, it just seems back in the day, everybody was training with tires, Is it, you think it's an injury thing like a lot of people are saying, or just?
No, I think it's just accessibility. And then even a lot of events, even if you see like local or national level events, a lot of times it's just accessibility. It's is patience, and then how much work that you want to put in the contest. Like you can drag out all these weights so your competitors can do it, but then at the end of the day, you got to have you and the volunteer staff have to clean it up.
Yeah.
Some promoters are not lazy, but some of them are not as hardworking as others, right? So some individuals will go the extra mile to get the heavy weights. Sometimes they'll go kind of the bare minimum to put on a contest. So it really depends on the promoter.
That's true.
But a lot of times that could be the difference between a good and a great contest, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it goes without saying. I mean, I think really it's our amateur promoters that are at a high level. And I mentioned before, I love all of our promoters, because anybody that's putting a good foot forward for the sport, they'll get better at it. I know they will. But these real good promoters we have at the amateur level right now are doing some fun stuff. And I love to see that, because really it just gets people excited about spectating these shows. I think is important, right? That's what we're kind of looking for, which we don't have a lot of over here. Not compared to Europe, that is. Is there anything that you think of kind of as a top level athlete now that you look at the idea of consumerism a little bit, and what would you kind of bring to the sport? What do you see coming into the sport that is allowing kind of more spectator participation, wanting to be more, be more consumerism in the sport?
So pretty much like what would be a good idea to kind of like help build strongman?
Yeah, exactly. And what are you seeing right now that's working? I know Anthony goes without saying. I mean, he's doing some great stuff, and that's working. I mean, but is there other things that you kind of see that would help blend a little bit?
I think of course a lot of the individuals I think they put a good step forward. I think kind of strongman is going to, I think, kind of continue to grow it is, but like to get on like maybe a faster, maybe expedited path, right? It's just a lot. Not it's only kind of like money in the sport, but just even if there's just more opportunities and more competitions, and then more, and again, equally as much as participation, I think that'll help. But yeah, it's kind of a little bit of loaded questions. I've always kind of thought about this, but a lot of it is just getting, I think, kind of promoting some of the top athletes and getting on revenue. And like Anthony's have some decent ideas too, about, and then kind of cross promotion with it kind of other with other kind of strength sports, like, but even just like even like Strengthly, even having that promotes all the different strength sports as well. So of course, I even got introduced to powerlifters that I wasn't familiar with, and of course been able to kind of look at their things and be able to apply to that, but like I wouldn't have done it prior to that. So like some of those different collaborations. So yeah, I would say potential things, other items like Strengthly, but there has to be that next big idea of like what could be what that strongman need, right? Because a lot of times the best innovations are from like disgruntled customers. Like, how can we, like, even though like the sport is growing, but how can we make the sport faster or grow faster? And that's going to be a $1 million idea. So unfortunately, I don't have that $1 million.
Yeah, no, and it's the same. Listen, it's a tough question to ask because the answer is really not specific to any one thing. I do like the idea of collaborating with the other strength sports. I thought one of the best shows every year that's fun to watch, and when we start getting more strongman participation into it, are those road games. I mean, those things are that's exciting, man. That's fun to watch.
Well, they highlighted strongman in that competition because it really was just strongman and CrossFit. But of course, the CrossFit fans stayed and watched the strongman. The strongman fans stayed and watched the CrossFit. So that was a great way to integrate both sports into the 2-day event, 3-day event.
And that arena setting was cool. And I think they even had some off events that guys were competing in.
Yeah, my friend Eric Dawson did the anvil grip event. They flew him out there to break his own record that he had. Unfortunately, he didn't get it, but that's because he set such a high standard for himself. So
it's nice to be a part of that conversation, right? I mean, Rogue flew out there and said,
he's still his record. So
that's right. No, that's really cool. Yeah, I love that show, and we always comment about this on the show. You know, CrossFit. I'm falling in love with CrossFit right now because I see these amazing numbers that these CrossFitters are doing, especially at a high level. Don't get me wrong, the CrossFit's still got all kinds of issues at the box level, but at this super high level, like you see at Rogue, and even at some more regional stuff, you see a lot of these athletes now transferring over into strongman. I was talking to Nick O'Hare, you know, and Sean Shoemaker. I mean, these guys are CrossFitters. Have you ever done CrossFit, Nick?
My brother and sister-in-law like CrossFit, as well as my stepsister and my other brother-in-law. But for the most part, I've done similar kind of WODs. I probably picked and chose what I kind of enjoy. I do sometimes like EMOMs or working fast. I'm not a big fan of burpees, but I've done a few workouts, but it's not particularly something I kind of like regiment in. But it's interesting. I'm pretty much doing everything that CrossFitters do, but just to a different capacity, different rep range, and everything like that. I think that's why CrossFit and strongman are pretty cool and pretty intertwined, is because it's generally taking kind of like, so of course, strongman is a little more of course, not of course the kind of like the ultimate kind of 1 rep maxes and the kind of like the strength side of things, and then of course CrossFit's a little more the endurance side, but they're using a lot of like the same implements. They're pressing, they're cleaning, they're running, they're moving, they're climbing, but it's just to kind of a different extent. So
the weight's getting up there too. I noticed. I can't remember who it was. She had broke the record at the road games, and I actually had to double take the weight. It was like 250 pounds for a deadlift. Oh, wow. And it was an event. They had to do so many reps, as you know. Mm-hmm. And she got it 62 times. Prevost was her last name. That's amazing to me. That's amazing to me that a woman, and no knock on women, I love strength athletes, particularly women. That was a record that I thought I would never hear.
It's probably like a 500-pound pull, maybe.
It might be. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. It's crazy. And then some of this overhead stuff these women are doing now. I mean, to no surprise. I mean, they're quickly approaching 300-pound logs and 300-pound axles. I know Melissa Peacock's a great presser herself, and I'm sure we're excited, all of us are, to see what she's going to do this year. What out of the 3 records that you have currently, what's your favorite one? Axle, block, or log?
The log. The log is more because it's a little more iconic towards strongman. I think it's kind of like the staple when it comes to pressing. So, and that one also, the axle, I didn't quite have to work as hard on it. It was the clean and pressing comes more natural. The log doesn't. The log is a very tough movement. And it's something that takes a little more time. So like, for instance, I still think I have another like 10 or 20 pounds on my axle in terms of breaking another record. On the log, maybe another 5 or 10. It's like that, at best, that's like a 50-50. I didn't think I was going to hit the log record, to be honest. Of course, I always want to be very confident, but I did hit all those goals and all those mile marks, and I did have a good recovery and got ready and all. But it's just putting the plan together. My best log was like 380. Of course, at the time the record was 410. So I had to not only hit a 30-pound training PR, but my best in competition. So like, of course, you try to use the data from competition because you're cutting weight and you're refeeding and you're competing, was 370. So I had to hit the log ended up being a 42-pound competition PR, which is very crazy. In previous, I was only hitting like 5 or 10 pound competition PRs, right? So to hit that huge gap. So I really had to work at it. And then the previous world record holder, Rob Kearney, prior to hitting 410, he hit 400 in another competition as a 105 kilo. And I'm pretty sure he hit 425 as a amateur heavyweight at the Arnold's one year before ever hitting that 410. So he already hit 400 a couple times. So that was pretty comfortable. For me, going for the record for the first time, I had a huge gap to do it. So I wasn't sure, but if I put my plan if I execute, and then on game day I hit the 373 for the push press, and that felt great. But then my knee immediately started hurting. So I put some like kind of cream on it, and then kind of went back out there. And then I missed the 400, but I kind of rushed it a little bit. But it felt pretty good. So I'm like, all right, I got to go. It's like, it's really now or never. I might not actually ever get the chance to go for the log record. So I kind of just I was like, this time don't rush it, and then really spread the feet. And then of course I ended up.
I tell you, when I watched that, Nick, I thought the most impressive out of those two was that push press. Your knee might have been hurting, man, but That was a push
I
press.
heard after.
Oh, did it? Okay. And I'll tell you, you barely push press that. It was almost just a static press off your shoulders. I mean, you had no hip drive. It just looked like you just fucking went right over your head with it. And it was beautiful, man. And I thought to myself, that was impressive. That to me was like, I'm surprised you didn't Viper press it. It was that impressive. And then, of course, once you threw that split in there, I think now talking to you, the most important thing that I'm taking away is a 40-pound PR jump. I mean, guys dream of that moment. You know, that's crazy.
So yeah, that's the difference between good and great, right? Is sticking it out. But and also I think it was also again a little more memorable because I missed that for a 100-pound log prior to that. So I think again that's just coming back from a miss attempt into a world record attempt. I think that pressing is awesome. I want to point out that Nick, you've got some great YouTube videos out there. I watch them. I point people to them all the time. Thank you.
Your instructional videos for pressing are really cool, man. You explain it great. Obviously, you're the perfect guy to do it. I know you're working with Strength Collective, right? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So with the Strength Collective, again, it's a collection of coaches, again, of course, across all 4 strength sports. And then of course they have different materials out there, a lot of educational materials, but mostly programs. But I offer, right now I have one program out there, which is Bless My Press. I'm also going to be coming out with 2 more programs, another, of course, for like the log record. I'm going to put that down in terms of people are interested in terms of like what that peaking looks like, or if they want a 2-day log program for like 9 weeks, that's pretty much what it's going to be.
Right.
I'm also going to do like a lower body, like off-season program as well. But I do have a lot more instructional videos. So I think I posted 2 or 3 on YouTube, and then I have, oh, hey buddy.
Yeah, there's my son. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hey bud. But yeah, I have like 2 or 3 videos. And then I have, on YouTube, and I have the rest, like 12 on the Strength Lead site. So my plan is to expand that library, I think, to probably another 12 or 15 videos.
So Anthony's running Strength. Is that one of Anthony Furman? Is that a group? How did that all come about?
Yeah, sure. So it's Anthony and of course his partner TJ. Of course, Anthony used to be his kind of former coach, and then they decided to kind of collaborate together to start this Strength Lead idea. And then right now, I think pretty much TJ works full time for them, or full time for of course the running his business with Anthony. And they just been, the goal is to kind of expand that educational, but they had of course the program platform, and then of course they have the contest side where they're hosting like the different classes. So I think just kind of through kind of like the community and really kind of pushing out good material and good content. I think that's kind of
I love it. I love who you guys are bringing in. If I'm not mistaken, you got Joe Sullivan's a part of it as well. Powerlifting side of thing. You guys got some powerlifters involved is what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I thought Joe was
I thought I saw him with you guys doing something.
It was, of course, you have the huge Asian guy, and then you also have John Hack. Those are probably the 2 notable powerlifters.
Okay.
But yeah, I gotta look at the roster because Anthony recently brought on Maxime Boudreau, Canadian, one of the top Canadian strongman heavyweights. He recently took 3rd at World Strongest Man 2021. So he's a great competitor.
So there's a lot of athletes that I'm just on the strength side of things in general, because Strength Lead is this part of the I guess the promotion, right? But Strength Collective is what you're a part of.
Well, it's a Strength Lead collective, so it's okay. So they run both sides of things.
Okay, gotcha. Mm-hmm. I gotcha. I had a question for you. I was talking to a buddy the other day about the stones at OSG. Were those coated stones?
Yes, they were, but the coat was very nice. But I think in terms of like a lot of that stone run, it's interesting because I thought I was going to be able to easily hit that 375. I think the 400 might have been a challenge. But I think everybody was just gassed at that point. And it was also a 21-inch, maybe 22-inch stone, so it was a little more difficult.
How tall are you?
5'11", 3/4.
I saw you in a picture with Nick Best and Martins, and you must have out-angled the shit out of them in that picture because you made those guys look small.
Yeah, I think Nick Best is like 6'1", and then Martins like 6'2", 6'3". But for the most part, it's always interesting in terms of like even like for me in the off season, I'm not I probably don't look as big as compared to when I'm like near competition. And because I think, of course, you have a great pump close to competition.
You're leaner for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think just compared to, I think you just caught them at a time where they're in the off season and I'm in my on seasons. But like, I think me and Martins, I think maybe, I don't know how much he's weighing. I think he's around like 150 kilos or 330. So
I
probably
thought
like 80 pounds, but probably all 80 pounds, all his legs, because in his trunk, it's pretty much keeps all his weight.
I love that picture because I thought to myself, there's Nic out angling those guys. He just made them look small. Now I know a lot of guys in the particularly in the under 90 and the 105 classes. There's a lot of guys that are cutting weight going into these shows. Some of them are really good at it. Some of them not so good at it. I've seen the competitions where it hasn't worked out well for others. How close do you stay in your competition weight? How going into a show, what's typically that cut for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll use the example of Clash, because that was, I think, a similar kind of with my similar plan going forward. But at Clash, the heaviest I got during that maybe like 12-week cycle or just the training cycle prior to Clash, I was 255. It was the heaviest. I like to be 250 or 249 2 weeks out from the competition. So if I'm not there, I'll slowly diet to 249, 250, and then ideally 1 week out, I like to be between 245 and 248 before I do a water cut. So that's generally been kind of my plan, and that's been my plan the last 5 water cuts. And of course, previous years I've only probably do like 1 or 2 water cuts for the year. This year, of course, I did 5 water cuts. So that was the first time doing more than 2 water cuts in 1 year, and ended up doing 5, which was pretty nuts. But it almost became like really routine and just a process, just like anything. So for the last few cuts, I was already, since I was already cutting down so much, I never got more than like 251 or 252 for those like mini training cycles between those close contests. But yeah, 250, I'll try not to get over 255, but I've been as heavy as like 265 one time when I was training. I did like an Arnold amateur in 2018. And I got up to like 265. So that's like the heaviest I've been.
Yeah,
that was fat.
So a lot of guys that generally that's the plan. Then you get an idea and where you're going to cut weight to a show.
Yeah, so I think most guys do that. And some people do have different risk metrics and risk reward metrics, right? So a lot of times if maybe a week out you're 240, that weight cut's going to be easier, and there's a higher probability that you're going to bounce back closer to what you do in training or maybe do better in training. But the heavier that you go is the bit you're taking a bigger risk to reward. It's great to compete at a heavier weight, but to compete at a heavier weight 100%. But the heavier you're doing the weight cut, the bigger risk that the water doesn't come off right, or something goes wrong in the weight cut, or that amount is too big and you just don't fully recover enough to win the contest, right? Some guys some of the great weight cutters out there sometimes are not even, let's say they weight cut from like 2 weeks out, they're like 260, and they get down, they bounce back, but they don't bounce back all the way to where they feel like full strength at 260, but they're maybe 90 or 95% of their best is still good enough to win the competition. Right. So people gotta figure out when it comes, if they are doing serious weight cuts, they gotta figure out what's their risk to reward ratio. My risk reward ratio is, again, what I mentioned, between 245, 248 at 1 week out, 250, 2 weeks out, and then no heavier than 250.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of guys now in these classes, that's a part of the sport for them. It's not, if as a heavyweight, and we know a lot of heavyweights, it's never a thought. It's
also, it's definitely a skill and something that even I feel I have an advantage over my fellow competitors, right, is being able to peak and cut weight and then bounce back efficiently. And again, it's just because I've done it, I think, just more often. I just have more experience. And again, there's always especially in weight cuts, you always get like the doubts and the questions, and you start, you're not feeling great, so you're down on yourself. But just being in those situations more often than not really kind of again helps. They like, oh, this is just temporary. And once you you get the food back in, everything's all golden. But I think you just having that, of course, back to the conversation, having that wrestling background. Wrestling, I was cutting weight once or twice a week, and I wrestled. Let's just say just college alone. I think I had like 140 matches, and I did probably 40 of them at heavyweight. So about at least 100 matches where I was cutting weight for in college. So that's
a skill, because that wrestling certainly that makes complete sense why you dial that in so well compared to other guys. And I think guys will get better at it, but I've heard of guys like I being in the room at night and just trying to really play catch up with getting the weight to where it needs to be. And this shit the next day.
IVs are a little bit of a game changer in terms of those heavier weights. In Russia, I decided not to go with the IV route. I wasn't going to bring either IVs or maybe get an IV there. Of course, I'm not just first time traveling Russia. I'm not familiar with, of course, what their protocols are. So I decided, I try to get a little leaner so I could cut weight from maybe 242, 243, maybe rather than the heavier, because when I was rehydrating, I'm not going to have the advantage of having an IV bag. So I changed my strategy up in there. So, but the IV bags are, they're a blessing. They're great if you can administer.
How did you do out in Russia? How'd you do out there?
Russia was good. I ended up taking third, but under the circumstances and under what I went out there, it wasn't originally kind of on my kind of like goals for the year. It kind of something I got invited to a week before Clash came out. So Clash was again that late April, early May. So late April, I got the invitation. So I'm like, all right, I'll do it as long as I don't get hurt at Clash. I'm doing possibly 11 events. Like that's on 3 events. That's a lot to the body asked for. So if I get through that, I'll definitely come to your contest in Russia. So then the Clash was over, and then I had like a 3-week block, and then I leave. Actually, was it? Yeah, I think it was something like that. But I was beat up after Clash, so I really had to kind of recover. So given the circumstances that I'm going from one of the hardest competitions I've done, and then going to Russia a month later, I had the goal was podium would be great. I really, of course, always want to win, but podium would be great. But then, of course, the traveling and all, and then the competition site was in the Arctic Circle, so that was just a trip just to get from the host city of Murmansk to Teribeka, which again was on the coast, and that trip, of course, that was a tough road that we're on, so we almost tipped over.
I couldn't imagine what that. You just almost have to get used to that and be able to travel halfway around the world to give yourself.
That's a skill in itself that I need to hone down. I'm great domestically, but so going in to the competitions with those 5 events, the max axle I won. Then we had a car squat, but the car squat was a little sketchy. The bar kind of moved, and I also, in hindsight, given the implement, and since there was such a short window, I should have trained the squat differently to pertain to the implement. I think kind of that type of car squat, having a low bar technique would have been better than have a high bar, which I did. I only got 2 reps, and I ended up killing all my points. So for instance, at the World, I was able to make up for it, but I wasn't able to make up for it here. So next event, I took third on the farmers. It was a speed farmer, so I took third by 0.4. Someone beat me by 0.2, so it's literally just a click of a thing. So I took third there. I tied for third on the deadlift. I almost tied for. Actually, I tied for third. I almost tied for first, but I didn't squeeze out the last deadlift. And then stones, I tied for first. So I had a good showing with 2 firsts, 2 thirds, and then kind of 1 blown event. But that ended up giving me third, and then two Russian guys won.
It sounds like points are pretty close. If you're just losing by half a second, that probably took you out of second.
So now we'll give the circumstances. So coming out of Clash, doing a short prep, traveling all the way to Russia, doing that, taking third. I think that's a huge win. I think I would be disappointed if I didn't podium, but that's my gold medal is the fact that I can go through all that and podium. And then next year I'll be even better, and maybe I'll become that international traveler that can just, doesn't matter what country it is, I can just go out and execute.
Well, I have a feeling those invites are going to be flowing into your inbox. Arguably there's no other 105 you want at your show right now than Nic Cambi, I'm sure. Yeah, nobody competes like you, Nick. Honest to God, I talk to a lot of guys, and you're not afraid to put them on the calendar, man. And I love that about you.
Well, but to compete often.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how you get better.
I know. I agree with you. Yeah, absolutely.
And then like then of course, like for you, even if you ever want other strongmen on, like oh my, I almost combined their names. Tyler Young and Michael Cogden, they probably compete more. They compete. I think Cogden did like 6 contests. I think he did one more than me. I think he's also doing additional contests. So he outcompeted me to a sense. And Tyler Young was in that same breath as well. He did about 6 competitions. We did 3 together. But Tyler has been competing all year, and he's going for the American record for the deadlift in Nashville, and coming up in mid-January at the Clash on right? Cumberland. Yeah. So, but yeah, those are 2 great examples. But like by going back to if you want to be a top level athlete, you got to compete as much as you train in the gym. You can't have one or the other. Those are the individuals kind of like cherry pick, and eventually, again, it's all depends on your goals. If that's how you want to live your life. Again, sometimes you're putting a whole year's training into one contest, and that contest doesn't go your way. That can be pretty mentally draining. But if you go do 5 contests, and maybe one of those, like 2, let's just say like out of the 5 contests I did, including the record breaker, I only did like 2 out of 5, but those 2 out of 5 was great. That would have been a huge year and better than I did last year, right? I just happened to put a plan on and being able to kind of execute through all 5 contests. But like, again, that year of training would be worth it if you competed more. So I think it's, you learn a lot about yourself when you compete. Like that's when you put yourself in the most kind of either difficult or desperate moments, or physically and also emotionally and mentally challenging. So I think that's how you grow, and that's how you can continue, is by competing often and not getting hurt. That's the other thing. If you can compete often and not get hurt, that's a great formula, but that's very hard to execute on.
Well, I'm from your camp as well. I believe competition in itself is another facet of training, because you have to be good at not just competing, but the idea that these contests aren't a gym session. They're 4, sometimes 5, 6 hours long, or you're doing 2 events one day and 2 events the next, and maybe 2 events on that third day if you make it to that point. I think there's something to be said about preparing yourself, not just mentally for that, but physically as well. I see a lot of these guys that only compete once or twice a year, quite frankly, shit the bed at some of these shows that end up going longer than they should, because they're just not keeping themselves in a good position to execute, during these competitions. So that's just another kind of off thing I was thinking about, that also probably lends to you zeroing in on being a better competitor, because you're good at competitions.
Yeah, that's a skill in itself. What you do in the gym, carrying into the gym and into the competition, especially if you're hitting PRs in the competition. That's again, a good skill to have. I know there's a lot, even this year, I wasn't necessarily the best deadlifter in the gym, but I was definitely one of the better deadlifters on the competition. So
real quick, another training question. Would you think, or do you do a lot of your gym PRs tend to be less than your competition PRs? Are you a guy that brings your weight training in the gym to about 90%, or do you attack the weight a little more aggressively leading into these shows for max weight kind of thing?
I think it depends on the event. But like for we'll use the ASM like max deadlift, for example. So prior to those deadlifts, my PR was 715. And I hit that twice throughout in training in my career. So I knew that was kind of an old number, but I knew I could break that. But my goal was to just, because you don't really know what jumps there's going to be at the contest. You don't know if it's going to be 50-pound jumps, 20-pound jumps. So, but I thought, since I was training the deadlift in conjunction with going the log record, because I was pretty much had the log record as my focus, but then training the deadlift. And then once the log record was done, I did 2 really heavy deadlift workouts, and I thought that would be my prep for ASM. So I think my main goal was to bulletproof my deadlift. So I did a lot of like the volume, but I also was doing a lot of heavy doubles and triples when doing like 13-inch pulls, because I found 13-inch pulls is where I have difficulty. Again, that's sticking point. So it's not, 13-inch pulls is great. It's not for everybody, because everybody has their own sticking points and difficulties when it comes to the deadlift. But 13-inch pulls is what was working for me after my main accessory. So I've been pounding a lot on that. And but again, to your question, the way I kind of prep for again certain events, it's kind of bulletproof. So it ends up, I think that 700 ended up being in the 90%. I'll sometimes max when it comes to let's just say on the log. I never maxed out the log, but I maxed out a one rep max push press off blocks on a barbell. Okay. So like a month out. So it's a little different. It's kind of a variation. I didn't have to clean it. So It's not going to take too much out of me, but I think it's going to be worthwhile for me to hit that rep max and then just recover from that
kind of thing. Yeah. Just to get the weight above your head. Is that what your more of a goal there was?
Yeah. And then, just tax a CNS there and not closer to competition. But that was still, but yeah, a lot of times depend 90%, but sometimes, and then the flip side, even too, let's just say on like a sandbag load, I had 355 in competition, but training, I never went over 308 throughout the 4 or 5 training sessions I had, because I knew if I did those fast, come game day, that 355 will be there. Yeah. Just knowing it, because it's like loading is a strong movement for me already. So that, I don't think I didn't break 90% there. So, but I would say probably for more static lift, you're getting into the 90s before competition.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I kind of thought that was kind of your camp and what you do. Nick, let me ask you, you came into the sport, it sounds like about, if I want to get my math right, about 10 years ago.
2012.
Okay, so almost, 10 years, okay, almost. Who brought you along as a strongman? Who are some people in the sport, not just today, but in the beginning, that are still with you today, that have been a part of your team, a part of your, kind of, because you don't do it all by yourself. I know that. I mean, you do all the lifts, but there's a lot of guys out there in grills that I'm sure are in your camp.
Yeah, of course, it's grown over the years. Of course, number one supporter is my mother. So of course, we've done strongman competitions together. So really? Yeah, we did one together, and then she's competed 3 times. So it's always, of course, she's if I ever become half as successful as her, I'll be excited. But yeah, she's a great lady. So and then probably my local gym. So of course, between CJ Murphy at TPS and then Eric Dawson at Titan Barbell. So Eric used to train under Murph. So Murph was Eric's first coach, but like when Eric was coming up, he was like kind of like the pro in my gym, and he was doing a lot of these kind of big contests in the US. And training full time. And the gym had like a few different levels in a building, but also had this like shed where they kept all the strongman equipment. And of course, the thing's called a shed, and it was out in Everett, Mass. It was a very like industrial area. So it was kind of like a really cool place to train, kind of very, just again, kind of almost training in like an industrial park outside of Boston. So again, it had kind of like that tough feeling, but that was kind of was a great training environment. So of course they've been kind of great supporters, and so I train between those 2 gyms. Generally I go to Eric's on kind of Saturdays, but Eric's also continued competitor. He's been competing probably since 2010, and now he's more in the masters rank. So the last few couple to masters, also did the grip event. So he's been very successful in his own right, but he's also been a good mentor, and a good someone to ask questions to. And then of course I've had other kind of great kind of training partners kind of throughout, kind of like especially in the local area. And then, of course, I've had a lot of help when it comes to kind of recovery. Of course, when it comes to like kind of different masseuses, chiropractors, and all. But yeah, I would say kind of like a lot of like the early supporters would probably be like Eric and Murph.
Yeah, and how about today? Adding to that collective, how about today? Who are the guys?
So of course I met Anthony in like 2017. Of course we hit it off, and we're kind of been great friends. I kind of was kind of pushing each other, and of course he's probably one of the reasons why my deadlift kind of grew, because he's always mean about my deadlift being small and weak. So I probably really wanted to kind of change that. So of course Anthony was a great influence. And of course, there's buddies like Sean DeMarinis. So I was mentioned 4-time America's Strongest Man. He's been a kind of a great help and a great mentor. There's Johnny Cisco. He's been kind of like he's also kind of been like a dad, and he's the person that I probably competed with the most. We've done like 14 competitions together. He was at 4 out of 5 competitions with me this year, and he competed next to me. So we did Clash, Russia, ASM, OSG all together. And then guys like like Jeff Lee and Terry Rady and Jeffrey Dibbs, other great competitors. And then locally I have a crew of like Michael O'Connor and Stan Cantor and my friend, 175 friend Nic Cambi, and of course another couple other individuals. If I'm throwing all that, like Matt Murphy and Nick Keel, they're all of course in the gym consistency. And then I go down to like Pawtucket sometimes to go over to the Top Strength Collective, and of course that's Steve Tripp's gym. And I met of course Nico, or the Greek Goliath, like he likes to go by, Nicolas Chapas, down there. And of course there's a lot of like kind of great lady women strongmen in the area too. But yeah, just the Northeast is a great contingency. And then you also have Matt Mills at Lightning Fitness, an hour and a half away. So I think he's almost like he loves like Superman, not Superman, sorry, like Marvel and DC comic superheroes, but he has a lot of stuff. So he's turning into the collector, like the Marvel collector.
Nice. I dig it.
I think that's why
it goes without saying, I think, and maybe I'm biased, and I am biased because I love strength sports so much, and strongman is, my love, of course. We have a unique fraternity and unique sororities in this sport that just kind of bring everybody collectively together. I'll tell you, I want to get more familiar with that Northeast area though, because it's kind of got its own little section out there, a demographic that I know we got guys like you and others that come from there, but I know there's a long history of strength and that comes from that area. And I'd love to get more familiar with it. So I'm going to have to pick your brain about maybe a couple other people that I can.
Absolutely. Of course. Of course you have the Has brothers in the kind of in the Foxborough area. Of course, I was mentioned before some of the talented kind of 105s. There's a lot of individuals that kind of come through here. And I think there's probably some names that are out now that are going to be the names of course, the next 3 or 4 years. So it's exciting just kind of where everything's headed to.
Well, everybody's chasing you right now, Nick. I mean, you had probably the year of years in 2021. I can't wait to see you get going next year. You're a big Patriots fan. I know that.
Yes, sir.
Matt Jones, man. I mean, listen, I'm not being biased right now, but because I got you on, but I love Matt Jones. How's the Patriot public out there?
Yeah, I think they're excited about Mac. The kind of first time he came in, I think kind of very cerebral guy. Seems like a Belichick guy, and he's pretty much kind of falls in line in terms of what he needs to do, and of course having that leadership when he's out in Alabama. Yeah, he's a great fit. And
I love watching him right now, man.
Super accurate. It's an exciting team. I think it was hard to ask Bill. I think it's hard to ask any head coach for them to lose their star quarterback and rebound the next year. I think that's an impossible task. No, I don't think there's been many examples of that, except and
the people he does it with is just amazes. Listen, he gets people from the Lions on that team that turn into Pro Bowlers for shit. I mean, the guy's amazing. It's fun to watch him this year. Jones is crazy. I love watching him. It's my second favorite team. My first one, as you know, was Detroit, which is terrible.
Actually, I'm not sure if many people kind of noticed too, but I always wear Patriots shorts when I compete. Generally,
I caught that. Yeah,
you caught that. Awesome.
Yeah, and I remember when we set up that first interview, you're like, as long as we get it up before the game starts.
Yeah, and then it's been like 11. Yeah, it's been. I was 11, I think, kind of when they first won their. When the Patriots first won their first Super Bowl. So that's, of course, kind of grown intrinsic in me over the years. So that's pretty, I think, kind of been driving. I think to kind of like, I've seen Tom Brady always says, which one is his favorite title? And it's always the next one, right? And I think that's kind of the mentality you got to have if you want to not only be on top, but stay on top. Yeah,
it's a great guy to listen to some wise words from. Well, hey, Nick, I appreciate you joining me today, man. Sorry about this cold if I distracted you.
No worries with this.
Talking in a bubble.
Yeah, great chatting with you. Of course, on this. Great chatting to you on this great Black Friday.
Yeah, right. Which I won't be a part of any of it. I'm going to stay home and let the girls do all that stuff.
The cyber deals, I think there's some decent ones.
Yeah. I'll be on that.
I was thinking about doing some early Christmas shopping, but I still feel pretty lazy from Turkey Day yesterday.
That Italian Thanksgiving you had?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Of course, my family. It was pretty traditional, but just the I would say the quantities were Italian. Let's just say that. Of
Yeah,
course,
yeah, right.
I didn't bring leftovers home. I brought an extra turkey home. That's
Yeah, that makes for a great sandwich the next day, man.
yeah.
For sure. Well, thanks for joining me, Nick. I'm going to
Absolutely.
follow up with you in 2022 if you don't mind. We'll
Yeah,
get this out there. I know a lot of people are big fans. I am. I'd love to talk with you today. And again, thanks a lot. If there's anything else you want to add, we'll end it
yeah.
there.
I would say there's a little kind of what you mentioned before, Joe, in terms of course, this was a great year and a lot of people coming after me. So like, it's almost like next year is like I have to be a totally different person because it's not only the competition is going to grow, like there's notable heavyweights that are coming down to 231s now because of the opportunities. So and of course everybody that kind of either saw my run, what I did was I put a bunch of data out there. I'm like, if you want to be number one, you got to hit these weights, and people know that now. They didn't know that going into this year prior to the pandemic, right? We had one competition in 2020 and one competition in 2021. So of course, to your listeners, if you want to, I pretty much have to reinvent myself if I want to stay on top, and that's kind of what I'm excited for right now. So that's why
I love that about you. There's no doubt that I know that's a challenge that you accept wholeheartedly, knowing that you got a target on your back right now.
Everybody, it's not target, but like everybody, I just motivated a whole crowd of strong men, so they're going to be coming after. Yeah,
you certainly motivated, man. So thanks again, Nick, and enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend. Eat some turkey sandwiches, man, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you, Joe.
All right, man. Thanks, brother.
Appreciate it.